On CM? Okay. Good morning, everybody. This is Mike Van Leer. I'm the director of the Career Development Center. This is my fourth year with HPU in the role that I have and have had a total of 20 years of experience in higher education and really enjoy having the opportunity to take what would normally be our workshops and be able to bring them to you in a webinar format. This COVID-19 has certainly taught us all to learn how to be more adaptable and flexible in how we still go about our work and business and educational lives. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, my colleague in the Career Development Center.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Ryan Tinloy. I'm the Senior Career Advisor. I already recognize some of the names in this class. Glad to see you folks are here. I've been with HPU for just finished my 8th year, going on my 9th year. Prior to that, I worked in state government for 12 years. I'm also a retired Navy lieutenant. I'm glad to be on board, and we hope this presentation will help you folks stand out when it comes to the job interview and the job search process.
Okay, so let's get started. As you can see from the opening slide, this is titled Stand Out, and the reason that we developed this workshop probably about 2 or 3 years ago was to provide some guidance and some information on how applicants can really help themselves to stand out throughout the application process, from when they're putting together a resume, a cover letter, and then going through the interview. There are lots of times where it can be very challenging to understand what it is an employer is looking for. And there are some clues and tips as to what that would be if you just are a little bit more meticulous throughout the process. And so we're going to show you some steps that can be taken to try to help you to get your resume into that stack of resumes that are going to be set up for interviews, and then hopefully going from that interview to a job offer. And we will answer questions periodically if you have them in the chat box. Ryan, are you able to kind of keep an eye on that? Because I've got the slide.
Sure can. Yep.
Thank you. So just interrupt me, Ryan, if there's any questions from people, and I can pause. And let's begin. So the learning objectives here are really to help applicants who are searching for employment to be able to leverage what experience they have, whether it's from prior jobs that they've held, volunteer work, membership in clubs, organizations, including your education. And then figuring out, how do I articulate these experiences that I've got that align with what the employer is looking for through both, well, through my resume, the cover letter, and the interview. So it really begins with naming your documents, thinking about the fact that sometimes when you're applying for a position, you're going to be asked to attach your resume. And so we're going to use a position today as a sample position that we all might be applying to. So this one might be familiar for some of you. At least you know what these job titles are, I'm sure. We have peer mentors at HPU, and the Student Life Office are the ones that recruit for peer mentors to support our freshmen that come into the university. And so if you were to have a resume ready that you wanted to attach to an email or to a site where you upload your resume, you might want to think about what your resume is actually listed as. It's probably a Word or a Google document, and you need to give that file a name. Well, you could name it your own name and resume, but that really doesn't say a whole lot about whether or not you've really given consideration to the position you're applying to. So you may want to think about naming your resume something like peer mentor and then your name, or something like HPU, then your name, and then resume, so that it's what you're doing basically is indicating to the employer, I've made this resume specifically for this position and this organization. A lot of times when we are putting together resumes, we think of it as, yes, I'll send out my resume. Well, really what you want to think about is having multiple resumes that you continue to build throughout your career, resumes that might be, if, for example, you're in communications and marketing, well, maybe you have one resume that you're building out that's specifically for communications. And then within that, it could be digital communication. Then it could be marketing, and it could be various elements of marketing resumes. So the more that you build a resume that's specific to a position, hold on to that one, because you may use that specific one as a template for a similar position or in similar organization you may be applying to in the long term. But the point here, don't just have one resume fits all. Similar for your cover letter. So the file name for your cover letter, you want that to reflect the position and the organization that you're applying to. So we provided you with that job posting for the peer mentor. It may be a bit outdated. I think that was from last year. I'm not sure if there's been updates to it, but regardless, we're able to use that for the purposes of this webinar. And so the idea is to look at things that are listed as key responsibilities or qualifications for the position, and consider these as descriptors. They're describing what's important to this employer, to this organization, and what they're looking for in an applicant, because these are the responsibilities you'll be expected to perform that they've taken time to write out and determine. And then they've also taken time to determine what are the qualifications we're looking for in applications. What makes you a strong candidate for it? So again, these responsibilities and qualifications, these are the descriptors that describe this position. And what you want to start thinking about is, okay, what do I have in these descriptors? What do I have in my experience? What do I have in my skill sets? What do I have in my educational background? So that I can show I've got alignment between what I possess in my skills, my experience, my background, with what they've defined as qualifications and responsibilities for this position. The more you speak their lingo within your resume and your cover letter, and when you get to the interview, the more likely it is you become a strong candidate that in fact stands out. So let's look at an example. There's a descriptor in the position that you have. It should be highlighted there in the document that you have. Now, I abbreviated it shortly just for this slide, but you should see that the descriptor indicates this, a peer mentor should have demonstrated effective communication, organizational, and time management skills. So we're giving you a sample example of how you would be able to translate that to your resume. So let's say, for example, you had at one point in your time been an after-school tutor. So as an after-school tutor, that's already a position that's kind of aligned with being a peer mentor. But what you need to show is exactly how did what you performed as duties and responsibilities as an after-school tutor align with this descriptor that's in this job posting. So here's a way in which you would be able to have certain words really match up. So for example, on your resume, if you were listing under your work experience the after-school tutor position, one of the examples of duties or responsibilities you held in that role could be listed right underneath the position that you held as using a collaborative learning environment, clearly communicated grammar assignments that enabled me to effectively tutor a class of 24 students. So what you're showing in that is that you developed a method as this after-school tutor to be able to communicate clearly to students using this collaborative learning environment. And what that's demonstrating is that you have the ability to create some organizational structure to this after-school tutoring position, and you had an ability to manage your time effectively by putting these students into collaborative learning environments rather than trying to teach all 24 students at the same time. So this is demonstrating that you've got some experience that aligned with this descriptor that is listed in the job position. So now we're going to ask you, if you all can take a look at that, again, that descriptor, see if you can think about any experience that you've had. What might be an example? What could be, and it doesn't have to be a job you held. It could be volunteer work. It could be membership in a club, an organization. Perhaps you participated in sports, a band, Any kind of experience would work in this regard. And how would you then translate that? So we're going to take a break here. Take a few minutes to think about this, maybe 2 minutes, and see if anyone's got an example. And you're free to unmute yourself or type in your responses into the chat box. Angela, okay, you've got a question. Is it okay to put a photo in a resume? Well, that's no, is a short answer to that. It is something that's common when we see CVs from international students. And so if you are applying for a position internationally, then a resume would be more appropriate. But within the US, that's usually something that we encourage individuals to avoid doing, simply because you could be judged on your appearance for a position, and that really should have nothing to do with your qualifications to perform in that role. I hope that answers your question. Good. Okay, has anyone gotten an idea on how they might approach that first descriptor? If not, we can move on. I know this is putting you on the spot. Normally, we are used to doing this in a large classroom where students would be paired up together to come up with responses. But if no one feels comfortable voicing that in the electronic environment, that's fine. We can move on. We have examples for the cover letter in the interview coming up. Okay, so I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Okay, so we'll go to the next one now, the cover letter. So another descriptor that's pulled directly from this job description indicates that peer mentors are student leaders who serve as mentors for incoming traditional aged freshmen. So you want to think about what experience do I have? So I mentioned, you could have participated in a sport, perhaps even been a member of a band. There's all kinds of ways in which you could demonstrate that you've got some experience with that. And so the example we come up with for this purpose is to think about perhaps a sport. And in this case, maybe this individual was a captain on a varsity basketball team. And so within their cover letter, they're trying to demonstrate that some of my background in high school aligns with what you're looking for in a peer mentor. And so to align with that descriptor, what you're listed as a sentence that would be pulled from your cover letter would be provided leadership and mentorship to younger players who struggled with the discipline needed to excel in team sports. So hopefully this is starting to trigger some thoughts for yourselves as to how you could demonstrate that you have experience or skills that align with positions that you're going to apply for. What I want you to note here are that the fact that we're trying to use exact words or very close to the same words because there's a strong reason for this. If you're applying to a larger organization, a lot of times the first run of your resume is not actually being even reviewed by an individual. It's being put into a software program that already has the job description in the program. And what it does is runs your resume as a match with that job posting. And it looks for keywords. Those keywords, the more that you have words in your resume that are the same words within the job posting, what that shows then is that you're a closer and closer match. And sometimes what will happen is that there will be an established benchmark for the matching of your resume with the job description. And it might be, say, something like 75%. That's the minimum match that the software program has been queued to set. And then once into the resumes that go through hit that minimum 75%, then somebody reviews the next batch of resumes, those that met that benchmark. At that point, now you have an individual looking at it. And that's why you see in this cover letter example, words like leader, mentor are being used. In this regard, we used mentorship rather than mentor, but that would be pulled up as well in those kind of software programs. Okay. Again, we're going to see if any of you are willing to take a stab at this one. So here, what we're asking you to do is think of how you might use an example in your own background that shows you would be capable as a peer mentor who could serve as mentors to incoming traditional age freshmen to HPU. Is there a way in which you could say, here's the example in my background, and how I might write one sentence on my cover letter that shows I've got alignment with this descriptor? So I'm going to leave this up here for you, this descriptor, and let's see if we can have anybody vocally or in the chat box provide an example that they have. This is our checking for understanding. I see your message to me, Kilo. That's fine. Yeah, I'm just hoping that our students have downloaded that document. I do want them to see just the PowerPoint. Okay, nobody wants to take a stab at it. At least you know what we're trying to drive at here. Hopefully the message is being delivered. If there are questions about it, please feel free to ask as we continue to go on. Let's go back to the slides. Okay, Ryan, do you see those still? The slides now?
No, I don't.
Okay,
Sorry.
give me a sec. One sec, everybody, sorry.
All right, now we can see it, Mike.
Very good, thank you. Okay, so we're going to jump ahead here, a little behind. Okay. Okay, so now this is the trickier part. When you're putting together your resume and the cover letter, you can actually give some forethought to exactly what you want to write on your resume and cover letter that shows that you are demonstrating a background or a skill set that aligns with the descriptor that's in there. So you can take your time, right? You could spend an evening putting together that resume and cover letter and get it just as you want it. But when you get to the interview, you can't anticipate exactly what you're going to be asked in an interview. And we would encourage you to try to come up verbatim with the exact responses that you would prepare for an interview, because you don't know if you're going to be asked exactly the kind of question that maybe you're anticipating. So what we want to do is just have you think broadly about, okay, well, what's important for this interviewer when they're trying to find out about whether or not I possess the necessary skills, knowledge, and experience for the position you're applying for. So we're going to just try to get you to think broadly about this part of it, because you can't get as fine-tuned to this as you would with the resume and the cover letter. But in this regard, we're pulling out another descriptor. And this one is listed as collaborate with supervisor, Hanai, peers, faculty advisors, campus services, and organizations to maximize the quality of a mentee's experience. And so what you see in this descriptor is that you need to collaborate with a whole lot of individuals and organizations on campus to be able to make sure that the mentee is receiving a very good experience through your mentorship. So the key part here is you can't do this alone. You do need to collaborate with a number of constituents on the campus within the organization. And so what'll be important, I'm sure, to anyone who's interviewing applicants in the student life office for this position would be to assess whether or not you've got this ability to collaborate. And so you could anticipate a question that might be something like, give an example of when you collaborated with others to achieve a shared goal. It's a broad question, and what you want to do is be able to prepare yourself to listen for some type of question that would be similar to that. So let's think about some responses you might prepare for that. Well, here's an example. Again, the question would be, give an example of when you collaborated with others to achieve a shared goal. Here's just a sample response that we put together to help you realize it doesn't have to necessarily be just from a job that you can cite where you've got that background. In this case, you were an individual that participated in a high school play. And the response could be something along the lines as what's written here, which says, 3 days before our opening performance of a high school play, 2 of the actors caught the flu. I hosted additional evening practice sessions at my house for the 2 stand-ins. I was so happy they didn't miss any of the lines in the play. So this is, again, you demonstrating your ability to collaborate with others to be able to achieve the success that has been set for the team, or the goal, I should say, that is set for the team. I hope this gives you kind of an idea of what we are trying to convey. Let me go to the next one. So it sounds like we're having a bit of a challenge getting examples from our attendees. But if anyone has one, this is, again, what we would be looking for is some type of sample response to a question like this. How would you go about it? This is the preparation part that we're really encouraging you all to put into your application process when you're looking at employment opportunities for yourself.
Hey, Mike, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Would I be able to use maybe any type of academic experiences or in-class work? Maybe
Very
I don't
good
have volunteer work experience or even paid experience. Maybe could I bring up something like I've collaborated with others on a group project, to achieve a specific goal?
I think it's really important that you do think outside of just employment. And that's why we used the play example on the previous slide. And so what you're referencing there, Ryan, is coursework. And sometimes some of the most stressful experiences that students have, and even at my advanced age, I can remember back to when I was in college and having to work in a team towards a project that would be impacting my final grade. And I thought, okay, this is a little trickier. I've got to collaborate with others, but that's an important part of the university experience, is learning how to work with others on a shared goal. Because once you join organizations, you're not necessarily just working for your grade. It's a collective grade that you're working on. I mean, for example, Ryan and I are the Career Development Center along with one of our part-time student workers. We don't work independently of one another. We collaborate before these webinars to say, is this the type of content we want to share with students? It's the same thing that's happening with our students who work with one another on projects when they're in class or when they're doing a volunteer effort. I know we had some students that did some volunteer work a semester before to try to put together a memorable evening for our seniors at an event in the evening. And it was a challenge for them. We learned about those challenges. But that's the important part, is that you're able to express how you overcame those challenges in a collaborative effort to achieve the kind of goal that was set for the group. Does that answer that question?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So, based on the job description, what you want to do is think about the kind of questions you might want to ask the interviewer. So I'm going to take a pause. I know it's a bit uncomfortable to have the silence, but what I'd really like to see is if we could get a little participation from our attendees about what kind of questions might you ask the interviewer. You get to the end of that interview, you've answered your questions, you've done a good job, and now they say to you, do you have any questions for us? And again, we'd like to have you think about what kind of questions would you ask for somebody in student life who's interviewing you for this position. And again, think of it in the context of the job description. And so I'm going to pull away my screen so I can also see the chat boxes. So Ryan, I'm going to turn to you. Maybe that'll get the wheels turning for our attendees. Any thoughts that come to mind for you about what you might ask in this interview if you were applying for the peer mentor position?
Sure. Okay. If I was applying for the peer mentor position, there's a bunch of different questions I would want to ask. First thing I would want to ask is, what is a typical day like for somebody in this type of department? Oh, I think we got a question here. Okay, so this is from Angela. Angela, thank you for asking. Her question is the work mostly needed teamwork or collaborate in different departments? That is a good type of question that you would want to ask. Mike, what's your insight on this type of question?
So I think that's actually a really good question, Angela, because this job description kind of indicates that you've got to do two things. You've got to provide this kind of almost personalized mentorship to an individual student. Yeah, you've got to do it in this kind of collaborative effort with a lot of other departments. And so I like that question a lot. I really think you're catching on with what we're trying to say here, and especially because it is what you've asked here is a question based on that job description. And so while you do need to provide that personalized attention as a mentor to well, you'll have multiple mentees in this position, but you're that mentor for that one student that maybe you're working with. But what you might find out is that this is a student athlete, and the student athlete is from a foreign country. And so as the student athlete from a foreign country, there's some difficulty perhaps in just finding out how to assimilate. And so what you may need to realize in this position is there are resources on campus. And so you could collaborate with the Office of International Students and Scholars and Student Life to be able to find resources that are available to help our student athlete be able to assimilate both culturally in Hawaii and also to the university. So that would be a really good question, because again, it's based on that job description. You know you're going to have to work somewhat on your own, but you also need to use the other departments and resources on campus to be able to help students as freshmen be able to make the most of that first year experience at HPU. So I do really like that question. I think it's spot on.
Now, this may not apply for this particular position, or sometimes it might. Could I ask questions regarding maybe my work shift hours or even pay or salary?
That would be a question. The work hours might be okay, particularly because as college students, even though you may be a peer mentor, you have a set schedule with your classes that you've got to work with. You've got to make sure that you're still attending your classes. And so there has to be, hopefully, some flexibility from student life to be able to allow you to work hours outside of class time. So that would be a good one. But I wouldn't be bringing up salary immediately. You haven't been offered the position yet. If you're indicating through a question in the interview, what am I going to be paid? What that's indicating is perhaps this is more about you just wanting a paycheck than you learning how to be an effective peer mentor. And that's what is most important for the folks in student life. There's going to be the opportunity to speak about pay whenever you're offered a position. So it doesn't matter what job, whether it's a peer mentor or whether it's for a CEO in an organization, eventually the topic of salary will come up. We do not encourage applicants to ask about salary until you get to the point that that either the employer has brought it up or you've been offered a position.
Mike, we got another question here from Angela.
I see that. Is it okay to ask when I will start the job? Yeah, of course. That's a great question. I think that's certainly something you do need to know, because, for example, peer mentors, you might think as a student worker at HPU, a lot of times our student workers begin on the first day or second day of a semester. We usually work around academic calendars. But in the case of peer mentors, a lot of times our peer mentors actually start a week or two before a semester starts, and particularly the fall semester, because we've got freshmen coming in for orientation. And the peer mentors are there to help guide and support those students through the orientation and the move-in process if they're going to stay in the resident housing. So a great question in that is to know when would you start, because that'll be important to student life, that you are available to start in that role sooner rather than later. They wouldn't want somebody starting in mid-September for this role for the peer mentor. Great question again. Thank you. Okay, we're giving one last chance. Okay, here we go. Angela,
I got two.
Yay. Ryan, you want to try Angela's here?
Yeah. So let me see if I can answer yours. So how about if I ask what does success look like in that position? That is an excellent question, because what you're trying to do is that not only you're trying to build up a relationship with that particular interviewer, you're trying to find out, how can I succeed in this position? what do they define success in that particular organization and for the peer mentor? That is an excellent type of question, and it comes in many different forms of variations. That is a good question I would recommend to ask, not just for this particular job, but any like an internship or even after you graduate. That is a good question that you should consider asking employers.
Yeah, I agree. I really like that one.
Yeah. Okay, so for Angela, should I call the company for a follow-up after the interview? Okay, that can be a little subjective. Mike, what's your take on that? Because I have my own personal viewpoint on that as well.
Well, I think there's a preemptive way to approach that one, Angela. Rather than doing a follow-up after that, there's two things. One, find out at the end of the interview, when you're given the opportunity to ask questions, to be able to say at that point, when will I expect to hear back from you about whether or not I'm a candidate for this position? So let them give you an idea as to when they're going to make decisions on it before you even leave the interview. Because you want to have that information. You don't want that anxiety of waiting to find out when you're going to be offered, hopefully offered the position. So we would encourage you. And then the next step, before I finish answering, the next step would be send a thank you card, even a message. So it could either be a card or an email message thanking them for the opportunity to interview for the position and that you look forward to hearing back from them. A lot of times following up afterwards, it could be a bit late. So I'm not necessarily encouraging you to do that.
I'll take a shot at, yeah, that's a good response. Yeah, because you want to get an idea during that interview, like what is their time frame, that they're hoping to bring somebody on board. Also, the follow-up note, preferably like a card that's personalized, to me that adds an extra touch to it.
And so I'll go back to Ka, you had one. Is it okay to ask what to do? What do they expect me to do?
What do they expect me to do for that position?
I'm not sure I would ask that. That's a little broad. And the reason I'm saying I wouldn't ask that so broadly is that, and no, it's not rude, but the challenge with that is in the interview, you've already seen the job description. You've got an idea about what they expect you to do. And so what I would encourage you to do instead is try to look at, is there some specific part of the job that you're still not uncertain about in the expectations of you? And to ask a more specific question. So it could be, I'll give you an example. We know that these peer mentor positions are ones that have students working with anywhere from 10 to 15 mentees. So you might want to ask in the interview, how many mentees should I expect will be assigned to me as a mentor? That could be a little more specific about the position. Or you could ask, is there a typical time in the day that's best to follow up with my mentees? Is it better to contact them after 5 p.m. when I'm trying to see how they're doing? But try to get a little bit more specific in the question you're asking in that regard, because this could appear, the one that you wrote, it could appear that it's that you haven't necessarily read the job description closely enough. Okay, very good. Any other types of questions you might ask? Boy, we got some great participation here. Thank you, everybody. I know this is a little different than typically being in a classroom together. So thank you for your contribution. Okay, if there are no more questions, I'm just going to show one more, and hopefully I've got it back up there. Ryan, are you seeing that? The slides?
After this is just the thank you.
There, that's it? Okay, that's what yeah. So just want to make sure for all of our attendees that if you do have follow-up questions, regarding this presentation or just any kind of advising that you would like, we are still available remotely, of course, but hopefully sometime next month we'll be back in the office, and we're there over the summer as well. So if questions come to you along this topic or anything else related to career development, this is our contact information. Feel free to reach out to Ryan and myself, and we'll get back to you quickly with as much support as we can. And with that, I think, Ryan, any more questions in the chat box?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. We've got another presentation next week. Can't remember which one that is. Ryan, do you remember what we got next week? Let's see. We got the virtual networking is on the 28th.
Yeah, I'm not sure what next week's one is.
Okay. Well, I'm sure it's available. You folks can see it on the calendar, but we are doing
This week
these.
is Nail the Interview.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nail the interview. So that one will be very focused on the interview and being able to help you all with that. So we hope you can join us next Tuesday as well. So we've got 2 more of these that we do in the month of April. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Have a great day.